Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning, Dave. How are you?
I'm well. I'm well.
How are you doing there?
Doing as well as we can in this crazy world we live in right now, right? It's a strange time, and you know, everything is difficult by not only the pandemic, but our country is in a strange political time too. So
As I told you in the email, the reason why we decide to have this talk with you is because we get a lot of messages on Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, our website with people constantly asking about how they can become a professional fighter, if they train at MMA Colombia, if they can go to UFC. And to be honest, here in Colombia, we are one of the most important gyms, MMA gyms in the country. But this is a new sport for us. We have been with our gym for 8 years already, and, and we have some fighters that are fighting outside, but Costa Rica, Panama, they are building their careers, but they haven't been at the UFC yet. So it's a process for us, like learning how to do it, and we thought it was really cool to share with people like these answers that we don't have, but maybe that you have more experience and it's your expertise, you can help us like answering that.
sure, sure, happy to do that.
Okay, so to start, you can share a little bit more about you, about how long you have been managing fighters, if you manage only fighters or soccer players or other kind of athletes.
Sure, sure. So I graduated law school. It's amazing to say this now, at the end of 1996, and very soon after I started my own law practice, just me, which was scary and challenging, and to some degree, it continues to be scary and challenging. But it was just something I had in me. I wanted to pursue the law and represent individuals. At the beginning, primarily in employment issues. And fortunately, I was able to sustain a practice and do well. And my practice grew where I took on a number of different types of cases, including civil rights, employment discrimination, commercial litigation, criminal defense, um, gained a lot of trial experience. And throughout this time, I remained interested and active as an athlete. I wrestled in college. Um, Big fan of American football, and I became certified as a NFL Players Association agent. And I did that for a few years, really enjoyed it, learned a lot about being a athlete representative. But I learned that being a solo practitioner without a big war chest to promise some of these athletes, and doing things the right way, which was very important to me, following the rules and regulations, it was very difficult to survive in that field. At the same time, I was training as a martial artist myself, and a lot of my training partners, professional and amateur, sort of came to me and said, "Dave, how come you're not representing us? We could use help. We could use help in our contracts and developing our career." And I kind of said, "I don't know why I'm not helping you. I guess I should be." So I started helping them this is probably now 12, 13, 14 years ago. I started doing it really informally at the beginning and enjoyed it and found so much success helping these athletes in their career that I started my own management practice. And it's been really, between that and the teaching I do at New York Law School, have been the most enjoyable parts of my career. I love doing it. And what's been really nice is I've worked with athletes from their first amateur fight through becoming professional, being a professional in the regional promotions, all the way through Bellator, UFC, other promotions. So I've seen all of the steps, which is really interesting and rewarding. And then towards the end of last year, I had talks with Paradigm Sports, which, again, coming from a biased position, I think is the leading management agency in the world, about joining them. And I will say at the beginning, and they may tell you the same thing, at the beginning, I was sort of hesitant because I did things my way, well, I thought, for a long time. And being on your own allows you to sort of make the choices you want to make. You can follow your moral compass. And, you know, just going to the unknown, not sure if they were going to share my values and my work ethic. And I can tell you, you know, almost a year later, I've been incredibly pleasantly, I don't want to say surprised, but I've been very pleased that it's a wonderful group of people that share my values, share my work ethic, and I've learned so much from them. Hopefully they've learned some stuff from me as well. And it's been terrific, you know, continuing to be able to work with athletes at different stages in their career, from, you know, relatively new professional athletes to, you know, athletes such as Conor McGregor and Chris Cyborg and others, and even helping people who have ended their professional fighting career, like Michael Bisping, who has a now successful post-fighting career, which is tremendously important and is overlooked so much, because the hope is most of your life is going to be your post-fight career. The majority of your life, and hopefully your healthy life, is going to be your post-active fighting career. So that's I guess a summary, maybe not so brief, but a brief summary of kind of where I am at.
I was asking you that when we met Julio Arce at New York back in 2018, you were his manager. I'm not sure if you are still his manager or the firm that you are working with right now.
He's with Paradigm. Yes, he is with Paradigm. Happy to say.
Okay, but just for the people to know, what other fighters are you representing right now? UFC fighters.
UFC fighters, gosh, we have a fair amount that are actually in the UFC. Obviously, in other promotions as well, but obviously, as far as champions go, Israel Adesanya. We have Conor McGregor, Megan Anderson. Sean Strickland is returning to fight at the end of this month after an injury he suffered.
Oh, nice.
Johnny Walker. I'm sure I'm leaving several out, but we have a pretty active, healthy roster of UFC fighters. Carl Roberson is returning to fight at the beginning of December. So we have a nice international roster of UFC fighters.
Okay, that's perfect. So Dave, as a manager, what are the strengths and personal attributes that an MMA athlete needs to have to achieve a successful career?
It's a broad question, right? And the fact is, of course, everybody's different. So it's hard to say that there's a one size fits all answer to that. But and maybe this is somewhat obvious, but what you see through all of the successful MMA fighters, and particularly the ones that make it to a major organization like the UFC, is consistency in everything they do, right? They are incredibly, remarkably consistent in their routine. I mean, you brought up Julio Arce. He is a tremendous example of that. He has a routine that I mean, I was going to say it will take a global pandemic to get him off his routine, but not even that, right? He doesn't miss training, nutrition, sleep, you know, continuing to learn and grow. And the other theme that I see with a lot of really successful MMA fighters and athletes is that they love the grind. And what I mean is, it isn't a chore and an annoying part of their day that they have to wake up at 5:30 a.m. and do their strength and conditioning or at the gym, or that they have to drive to training every single day at 1 o'clock, and then in the evening possibly train again. They love it. It's part of their passion, and it's the people that do it, and it's sort of a checklist, and they got to get this done and this done, and then it's rinse and repeat without that kind of passion. I don't think you see the success. Now, obviously, it takes athletic ability and mental toughness and a great team around you, which we can dive into more, but the team around you is incredibly important. But I do see this theme of consistency and loving it. And the consistency part, I mean, my wrestling coach used to call it longevity as well. And it's because I understood that more and more as time went on, in that success doesn't always happen quickly. And more often than not, it doesn't happen quickly. And I see a lot of younger fighters sometimes who are 21, 22, 23, and they'll ask their coach or their manager or me, how come I'm not in the UFC yet? How come I haven't made it yet? And you can make it. And in the fact that you're not at a particular place yet doesn't mean you're not successful and you're not following the right path. So the sticking with it, not jumping ship because you see others around you possibly getting a contract with this organization or that organization and think that you've done something wrong or you're missing out, is a mistake. Just staying with it, having a belief in the process. That's another cliche that I've heard a lot through my career, and early on maybe rolled my eyes a little bit about it, but I believe in it so much now, is believing in the process, and that the process is the destination. And if you just immerse yourself in what you're doing the right way with the right team, and stay with it, and not just keep looking at the destination. When am I going to get here? When am I going to get there? But being involved in what you're doing, fully committed, that gets you success. And to that destination you envision. And sometimes you get to that destination and maybe it's not even as good as you thought it would be, or you create a new goal. And then, so it should all be part of the process of loving what you do. And I know I'm meandering a little bit, but maybe that is at the heart of it, that what does it take to be a successful MMA athlete? It's really loving it, not doing it for any other reason than you are a martial artist, you love competition, you love putting yourself in an arena and testing your strength, physical, mental. I often say I think athletes that compete in mixed martial arts and the Tour de France cyclists are the most incredible athletes physically and mentally in the world that I see. It's remarkable. So you have to want that challenge and understand that it's going to be difficult.
Yeah, that's true. I completely agree. I'm not MMA fighter or athlete, but I'm seeing all the time how these people train and how they love and how passionate they are about this sport. So for you, which would be the perfect disciplines, combinations, and skills that an MMA athlete need to have?
Again, I don't want to suggest that there's a one-size-fits-all, so I'm going to give you my opinion, and I'm also going to sort of tell you where the sport is going with respect to that. I think wrestling is the #1 most valuable base you can have to become a successful MMA fighter. And if you are someone that has been wrestling from a young age, and if someone that has been doing it through high school and college for sure, I think you are becoming prepared for the type of grind and challenges there are in being an MMA fighter. And to be even more specific, I think Greco-Roman wrestling is a very, very helpful base and background to have. Body positioning, ability to shift your weight, be comfortable in close spaces. The subtlety, I think, of Greco-Roman wrestling is such an incredibly valuable tool to have in mixed martial arts. With that said, I would also add boxing. I mean, at the heart of it, you know, most fights are decided in a person's ability to use their hands and
Yeah.
strike with their hands. I've seen, yeah, I've seen that spending time at the boxing gyms has really had a great positive impact on the athletes. Just having to sort of isolate that one aspect of their game and improve their striking with their hands has really been impactful and helpful. So, but with all of that said, you know, more and more of the new breed of mixed martial artists are just that. They are learning mixed martial arts. And fairly recently, I was talking to a fairly young fighter, and I said, so where, you know, how did you start? What did you start in? Taekwondo, wrestling, kickboxing? And he kind of looked at me and he said, mixed martial arts. That's what I started in. And more now, that's the art that younger people are learning, is the whole game. You know,
Yeah.
they're learning wrestling, jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, Muay Thai, boxing, all together and putting it together at a much earlier age. You know, so many of the fighters now, even those in their prime right now, started in one discipline or learn those disciplines really separately. It was very compartmentalized. You know, they have their boxing coach and they have their wrestling coach and they jiu-jitsu at a different gym. Now it's kind of all together. That the jiu-jitsu coaches are thinking about jiu-jitsu for MMA. The kickboxing coaches are thinking about how takedowns should be incorporated into kickboxing or Muay Thai, which is great. That's the way it should be. You know, the wrestling coach comes in and realizes you have to account for the fact that you can't be sitting in a single leg forever because someone could be throwing elbows at your ear, you know?
Yeah.
And that's really the way the sport's being taught more and more now.
So how is the fighter's training process? How is, for example, you were telling us before about how Julio Arce wakes up at 5:30 in the morning. So how is a regular day of one of the fighters? And how is it possible to have a long-term projection?
Yeah, I mean, those are good questions. And again, you know, I'm repeating myself. There isn't a one size fits all. You mentioned Julio. I mean, you know, I know while it may vary somewhat, I know he trains 5 to 6 days a week in the morning with his team. He usually starts with some strength and conditioning, and then can be doing a variety of disciplines for 2 to 3 hours, and then often will supplement that later in the day with some non-contact conditioning, whether it's some road work, taking a run, or hitting the bag. I you know, represent another athlete that pretty consistently will wake up at 5:30 in the morning or so and do his strength and conditioning, then go have his breakfast and handle some of the daily chores. And then more midday will be training for several hours with his team in, you know, kickboxing and jiu-jitsu and wrestling. And then often we'll have a similar session with them or at another gym in the evening. It's a full-time job. It's a full-time, grueling job. And, you know, again, if you think about it, and being a professional fighter is different than a lot of other jobs, and we'll get a little more into that, but it has to be your full-time thought and job, right? I think some people might get into it thinking, well, I like doing this and it's sort of a hobby / job. You can do that, but you're never going to reach the highest levels doing it that way. You know, if you're running a gym, if you're a journalist, if you're a lawyer or an accountant, you went to school for that for a long time. And everything you do is thinking about that job. If you're running a gym or a business, you're thinking about that and involved in that in some way all day. It's not a hobby. It's the thing that you think about when you wake up, when you go to bed, sometimes in the middle of the night. If you're a lawyer, you're thinking about your cases and your clients all day. You're continuing to educate yourself. You're continuing to improve. It's part of your life. And it has to be the same if you're going to be a successful professional fighter. Now, what's the additional layer? And maybe I'm jumping to another question of thought here, but it's really important. In addition to all of the challenges in being a successful professional fighter, and I'm sure you know this, at the beginning, and sometimes even at the middle, you are not earning a lot of money. So you are doing this incredibly time-consuming, challenging job, sometimes without income. So athletes need to supplement that income, and most of them don't come from wealthy families who are willing to just give them money to train all day. It means they are doing something else to earn a living. A lot of them are teaching martial arts. It's sort of part of the whole lifestyle. But some of them are working as teachers. Some of them are working as custodians, as construction workers, as accountants. So the additional layer is having these two full-time jobs. And while your heart may be fully in one, your time and effort does have to go into the other in order to make a living. So it is so difficult because of this extra layer of performing a full-time job at the beginning, really without income, sometimes paying to do that job. And this is the cold hard truth about it. And some people don't want to address this head on. If you're going to put this time in to be a successful fighter, you are not only likely not making money, certainly when you're an amateur, you're not making money. And when you're an early professional, you're not really making much money. You can get to sponsors a little bit and partners, which is helpful and important. But you're paying to do it, right? Because if you're going to eat right, it costs more money than eating fast food and eating poorly. If you're going to go train several times, many times a week, but maybe more than one time a day, you're traveling. That's gas. That's having a car. That's maintaining that car. And if you're using public transportation, that's paying for that public transportation. That's paying for gear. If you're training actively, those gloves need to be replaced often. The other gear may be a little longer, but those gloves need to be replaced. That means laundry. These are little things people don't think about. But if you're working out 2 or 3 times a day, you got a lot of laundry. And it's maintaining that. Everything adds up. Everything costs money. So there is a cost just to get there. And then you have to pay your bills and very often support your family. So it's an incredibly challenging lifestyle. And an incredibly challenging career to take on, particularly at the beginning. Obviously, the hope, although very few percentage-wise are going to get there, is that you get to an organization that's going to pay you where you can make a nice living. But that's after many years of that grind, being in that process. And it is not easy.
Yes, I'm glad you are talking about this, because many of the questions and many of the comments we got on Facebook and Instagram are from people asking for support, just like, hey, I want to become a MMA fighter, but I need you to sponsor me. And it makes all the sense what you said before with this, because it's about discipline and consistency. It's not just like one day you become a MMA fighter and it was that easy. So it's so nice that you talk about that. So what is the best age to start a career in MMA for you?
Yeah, again, I know I start a lot of these answers off with it depends, and there's no set answer. And the reason that's maybe even a strange question is, that question should come from the individual, right? When I hear that question, what I mean by that is, when I hear that question, sometimes it sounds like a parent thinking, when should I start my kid in this stuff so he can become or she can become a professional fighter, right? So I'll sort of answer it from 2 perspectives. If you're a parent, and you want to get your child into martial arts, which I think is a great thing to do, absolutely great. In addition to getting them into other things like playing a musical instrument and learning a language and doing well in school, and being a good citizen, and being good to their pets and their siblings, getting into martial arts is great. I think the answer is, one, when they're able to listen to instructions and be disciplined. But beyond that, there's no set age. I mean, I think I repeat myself, I think a great sport to introduce a child into is wrestling, but certainly the other disciplines as well. And again, from the parent to child perspective, I think it's making sure they enjoy it. So if you start them when they're 4 or 7 or 9 and they're not enjoying it, after a brief time, give them a break and reintroduce them to it when they ask to do it. I think they need to enjoy it, or it becomes a chore that they won't want to return to. As far as for yourself, I mean, the answer is it's good to start in martial arts right now, right? To start now. I think your question, of course, is more geared to someone with a view toward becoming a successful professional fighter.
Yeah.
When do they need to start? Well, you can't look backwards, right? You can only start now. So someone that is passionate about it should start now. And I further reading into your question is probably thinking the question really is this: is it too late for me, right? If you're a 22-year-old, a 25-year-old, a 30-year-old, and you've started training or you want to start training, is it too late for you? I always start with the answer that it is never too late, right? Because really, and I don't want to sound too hokey here, if you put yourself into it, you believe in yourself, really anything is possible. I'll also step back though and give you kind of the greater percentage answer and really the likelihood of how you would get success. Like many sports, and certainly there are exceptions in tennis and other sports about when people peak, athletes tend to be in their prime in their late 20s to early 30s. And I think you see that largely in MMA, that's where athletes tend to have their most success. Of course, there are outliers, right? You have tremendously successful MMA fighters, 21, 22 years old. We see it now. And you have people older. Largely in the heavyweight division, you see that a lot, but you see athletes that are successful into their 40s, sometimes even their mid-40s, So there are outliers, but if you want to look at the percentages, most of them are in their late 20s to early 30s. And I think the road to getting to that point is often at least a 10-year process. And again, I hear people, and it's just you and I talking, I hear people saying, what about this person? What about this person? This person was only training for 2 years and they're great. And yes, we're talking about human beings and athletic performance. There is no one answer. And that's why I'm sort of hedging my bets and I'm giving you sort of all these exceptions. But if you look at percentages and likelihoods, the athletes that start in their late teens to early 20s and are dedicated and talented and have a support system around them, in that 10-year process, typically are in a successful place. And I shouldn't say it's typically, those that make it, right? Because it's not typical. These are the outliers, the people that we see that even sign a contract with a UFC or Bellator or ONE are the outliers. But I guess late teens, and if you look at it, a lot of them now are athletes that were college wrestlers. Now it means they've probably been wrestling since they were a kid, but that's when they start real intense training and then may finish their collegiate wrestling career and then join a martial arts gym. And then over the next 5 to 10 years, kind of build that professional resume.
Okay. Yes, I think everyone's process is different. So as you said, it's not like just one answer for everyone. But the point is like everyone has a different process, and it depends on you and how you enjoy it, how passionate you are. But it's,
and the thing I'd add too, and it's just the state of the sport right now. Well, the sport, of course, is still young and growing, and even sort of younger, more growing aspect of the sport is the female participation. So, I mean, I guess I would qualify that answer by saying because there is less depth right now in female MMA, that you often see the path is shorter because, the same talented athlete who is female may have less obstacles, at least right now, to getting toward a regional promotion,
Yeah.
national championship, and then into a larger promotion. So I think you do see the path with our female MMA athletes a little shorter right now. But that I think is going to change as more talented women go to MMA. You know, you're going to have your women who typically went to basketball or track or weightlifting or other sports are now looking at MMA as an attractive option. And I think you're going to see the talent level rise as it already is.
Yeah. So another thing that we would like to know is here in Colombia, and I think in many countries of South America, there are less opportunities because there are less events, MMA events. But we would like to know, knowing your experience in America, what would be the process for a MMA athlete to build that career? Like in America, how a fighter usually builds that career?
Yeah. Regional promotions are so important and are such a big part of this process. And when I say regional promotions, I mean the non-UFC Bellators, for example, the smaller promotions that tend to draw fighters from the region, from locally, to compete, and that's what you need. I am happy every time I hear that there's a new regional promotion popping up. I don't think there can be too many because it means opportunities for people to measure themselves and test themselves and be noticed. And obviously the UFCs and Bellators of the world are scouting these regional promotions. I think you'll also want advocates on your behalf, whether it be your coaches or your manager, to reach out to these larger promotions and educate the promotions about the athletes. But they're looking at these regional promotions for new talent to bring on. So that's where it starts. And your question is a good and important one because I do know that in Colombia and a lot of the South American countries, there aren't a lot of regional promotions. So it creates another layer to all the challenges that we've been talking about already is opportunity. Once someone is ready to compete, once they feel they're physically and emotionally ready to compete and their coaches and support system feels the same, where are the opportunities? So if you don't have regional promotions, I'm going to add a huge additional cost to what we were just talking about, which is travel. And it may not just be travel domestically within your country, but you may have to get that passport, get that visa, and fly to another country to fight. Yeah. We know how expensive that can be. Okay, now we're not just talking about flights. We're talking about being away from maybe your other job, from your family, bringing coaches as well, right? you typically need to at least bring one coach, if not more. You're flying that coach, accommodations to where you're going to be, a place to live and sleep and eat and train. These are all additional layers of expense at a very minimum. So, I mean, what I would love to see are people that have the means and are passionate about martial arts to start regional promotions in Colombia and the surrounding countries as well. That I think is tremendously important. Paradigm is a global country, a global organization. And we find that when athletes from around the world reach out to us and we think they're terrific people and terrific athletes, we realize the challenge in certain regions in getting them opportunities because there are none, or the travel and expense involved in bringing someone to a regional promotion is tremendous. And then at that point, the athlete has to weigh, is this something for me? I love it, but am I able to build my reputation and my experience with the lack of opportunities? So what would I like? Again, I'm repeating myself. What would I love to see in Colombia? The people that have the money, that have the means, that have the infrastructure, creating more of these regional promotions. And listen, I understand there are challenges. I talk to people that run these regional promotions around me, and I understand the headaches and how challenging it is. I mean, they have challenges of their own. There's a lot that goes into doing it well and making sure that it's safe for the athletes and the spectators. And listen, of course, we haven't addressed this, you know, we talked about it a little bit. We're in a global pandemic. I understand, you know, sporting events, concerts, all of this stuff is very different. You know, a lot of the regional promotions that I am friendly with and I interact with regularly have been doing no spectator shows. Now, that's great for the athletes, and it's great to keep that promotion's name out there, but the majority of their income comes from people walking in the door, paying a fee, purchasing food, alcohol, other beverages. That's an important part of it. So the regional promotions that have built a reputation have been able to get some income from online streaming and broadcasts such as UFC Fight Pass, which I think has been a really important thing throughout this pandemic. It's really allowed a lot of regional promotions to continue to put on shows, put their product out to the public, and make some money. But forward-looking and being optimistic, when we're able to have crowds, limited capacity or otherwise, I'd love to see some business owners that care about martial arts, care about growing the sport, coming together and starting up regional promotions. I don't think you can have too many regional promotions. If they're done well and safely, I think creating opportunity for athletes to showcase themselves is great. Love it.
Okay. I think we already talked about this question because you explained to us how a fighter sometimes has another job to just keep going and support the family, the training. And the question was how an MMA fighter gets financial sources to support his training, feeding, health, and promotion. So I think we already talked about that, or not sure if you have something to add.
We've touched on it a little bit, and obviously it is so important. And again, I keep using the word challenges, and there are so many. You know, sponsors are very important to an athlete. Sponsors meaning people or organizations that are willing to support an athlete, whether it be financially, just directly through paying them money, cash, or giving them products that they need. And, you know, as MMA grows, I think it's been very positive in that a lot of the biases, misconceptions around mixed martial arts have fallen away, and sponsors are much more open to partnering with MMA fighters. You know, certainly if you go back 25 years ago when the UFC started, or more than 25 now, you know, there were a lot of negative connotations, a lot of negative views toward MMA. You know, you heard the term human cockfighting and no rules and anything goes. And obviously the sport's changed so much where those perceptions are less now. But there still are a lot of sponsors that would prefer not to be connected to MMA. I think it's a shame, but it's still out there. With that said, there certainly are sponsors that are working with MMA fighters and gyms. So the ability to get support financially and through and products is so important, and has been really a very big push at Paradigm recently over the past year. I mean, it's always been an important aspect of representation, but we've really put a lot more attention on it because we realize the importance of athletes being supported by having gear, food, other health and nutritional supplements, and money, you know, through training camp. So we've been trying to, and successfully doing it, showing brands, and certain, you know, the ones where there's a real synergy, it's a lot easier, the value in being associated with MMA fighters, particularly the ones that have been doing a great job with their social media and have, you know, obtained a significant following. Because one, listen, following is important, outreach, you know, watching an athlete use your product, endorse your product or your brand. If it can get to a lot of people, that's wonderful. But also brands starting to understand who an MMA fighter is, that she or he is someone that, you know, typically have really incredible work ethic and values, and loyalty, and you know, the values that most of the successful MMA fighters have are the kind of values that you want connected to your brand. So I know I'm kind of winding, I'm sort of meandering down this path, but one of the things I would say to all of the aspiring MMA fighters is add this to the list of things, add this to one of your job tasks, which is thinking about how important social media has become today for athletes and entertainers, and building that, putting out content that people would be interested in, whether it's your training and your fighting and competing, or your nutrition, or your family, or your hobby. You know, people are often once they become interested in someone because of their athletic ability and their success, they often want to learn more about them. And as an athlete, opening up appropriately about, you know, what you do outside of fighting, and very often it can't be a lot because fighting takes over your whole life, as we talked about. But building that social media presence so that brands will want to be connected with you. At the beginning, typically when athletes don't have a huge social media following, usually sponsorships consist of product, you know, and that can be tremendously valuable. I mean, listen, if you have a meal company, for example, a meal prep company, healthy meal prep, that's willing to deliver meals to you, I mean, gosh, that could be the value of $200 or $300 a week if you did it
Yeah.
yourself. And the time of preparation, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of value. So I don't want to diminish the value of product, and having a company that's willing to supply you gear and apparel on a somewhat consistent basis, very valuable. But we are always looking to try to get our athletes income outside of fighting, and even more than that, sustainable income that might go beyond fighting, because we've touched on it a little bit, and it's worth repeating, and maybe one of the most valuable pieces of advice to give to any MMA fighter, athlete, someone that wants to make this part of their career, is that, one, this career can be taken from you like that, right? Out of your control. You could sustain an injury that could prevent you from continuing to train and compete. No one wants to face that, right? There's certain things in life we avoid. We don't like to talk about head on, but you have to acknowledge that. I don't care who you are, how great you are, how healthy you are, how strong you are, how confident you are, they can be taken from you like that. And the other part of it, we did talk very briefly about it, that the hope really is that the majority of your life is going to be post-fight, right? I don't want my athletes being punched and kicked in their head and their joints and twisted and turned too long. You know, I want them to have a successful, lucrative career, really enjoy it, have great experiences, make money, so that they have options after their fighting career. So focusing on your non-fighting career life is so important. And, you know, sponsorships is just one small part of that, but building a partnership or relationship with a brand that is willing to financially support you in exchange for your support of them, however that may be. Yeah, thinking about post-fighting, and have something else that you're interested in or passionate about, or find something else that you're interested and passionate about that you can do after your fighting career. For a lot of them, it is continuing to be involved in martial arts as an instructor, as a gym owner, and, you know, in some way as a commentator, starting your own fight promotion. I'd love to see more fighters do that. But whatever it may be, if it's, you know, starting a business unrelated to athletics, whatever it is, or getting a job with a company in an industry that you're interested in, that stuff needs to be thought about and fostered and slowly built through your fighting career. Because if it does end abruptly, and not by your choice, where you can sort of start to plan as you end your career, if it ends abruptly, now what, right? And we see athletes, put MMA aside, we see athletes who have been successful in some of the major sports in the United States in particular, who end their careers even after making a lot of money, and then suddenly money dries up. They don't know what they want to do, and they find themselves in difficult situations. So I know I've put a lot on the plate of the potential athlete. But I think it's important that people know this going in,
Yeah.
rather than put all of their hopes and dreams into something and not really understand everything that's involved.
Yeah, we really appreciate that. So this is I think the most important question for us.
Okay.
And we would like to know, how are the agreements between gyms, coaches, manager, and athletes, like the people that are involved in the training, how things work between them when a fighter wins a fight?
So this also varies, right? Because contracts and agreements can vary as much as people want to, so long as they are not in violation of the law or unconscionable or violate some public policy. So, fighters and gyms and managers and other organizations can be as creative as they want. What I can tell you is that with respect to gyms, it works in a variety of different ways. I mean, what I see very often is gyms will provide free training and use of facilities to an athlete with the either explicit agreement or the expectation that that athlete will, of course, be respectful at the facility and all that, but also promote the facility, the gym, in an organic way on social media or otherwise. Sometimes the gym will expect that that athlete will work in some capacity at the gym, whether it be at the front desk or in maintenance or teaching classes. That's a very common scenario that we see, because gym fees, facility fees can be very expensive. So that kind of barter situation is common. Now, there are also some athletes that will pay their coach a set fee for the training and the services. I see that less often, but again, it doesn't mean one size fits all. It doesn't mean one way is the right way. What I see most commonly is that barter type relationship at the gym, and then typically coaches, trainers would be paid to travel to an event with somebody or to corner somebody or for sort of services above and beyond. And what those fees are, they completely vary. I mean, sometimes it's just covering the cost of travel and some meal stipends. Sometimes it's a set fee or a percentage of that fighter's purse, of that fighter's winnings at the event. I don't suggest that any one of those is right or wrong. I think the flexibility, makes things work. You find out what works for the trainer, gym owner, and athlete. With respect to management, usually it is a set percentage of the fighter's purse for fights that the manager gets for them, and a set percentage of the money that manager gets in sponsorships and other income outside of directly from the fight promotion that that they get for the athlete. And those again, of course, are negotiable. I mean, you come to an arrangement with the manager or the management team that you feel comfortable with. I guess what I would encourage any athlete to be careful of is any manager that is asking for kind of any upfront money, right? My belief and Paradigm's belief is that fees should be based on money that the athlete actually earns as a result of the manager's efforts. And it works in the sense that it promotes the manager's efforts to be there because they're paid when they do a good job. And it prevents athletes from taking money out of their pocket. Very often their pockets are close to empty anyway when they're doing this at the beginning. So I would just encourage athletes not to ever take money out of their pocket for representation.
Okay, so this is our last question. As I mentioned before, here in Colombia, the MMA events are very few, and build a record is very difficult, and financial support is very low. So knowing this condition, what would be your advice to a young Colombian fighter that want to become an international professional fighter?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, everything we've talked about to this point is part of the answer, right? In that, the first part of it is, what's on them, the training and the dedication and the dieting and surrounding yourselves with the right people. To become an internationally recognized MMA star, you need to start at a regional promotion, right? The UFC, will use them as the example, and typically what everybody's talking about. They're not going to pull someone that doesn't have somewhat of a resume. It is very, very rare. The exceptions we see are people that were prolific in other sports. We just saw recently a very high-level female boxer get a contract with the UFC, but she had already paid her dues and competed at the highest level in striking, in combat sports. So with putting those exceptions aside, it goes back to kind of what we talked about, that my hope, particularly in Colombia, that there will be more regional promotions, because that is an essential part of this process. You can't skip over it, right? Again, with the minor exceptions, but of course, those athletes didn't skip over it either, because they competed at the highest level in a comparable sport. We need to see these regional promotions grow. And I know right now, where we are in October of 2020, might not be an attractive option for an entrepreneur to start a regional promotion, but I hope that thought, time, and money is going into this, because that is what's needed. Because again, to repeat myself, if the athlete cannot travel, does not have the means to travel to the United States or to the UK, for example, to compete, you need to compete where you are, and we need to see those regional promotions. So, it might be a little bit of an unsatisfying answer, but I want to give the honest answer, which is we need to see those regional promotions in greater number. So there's opportunities for the athletes that are ready for those challenges.
Okay, Dave, we really appreciate your time and like all your knowledge. This is like really valuable for us. We hope to have you here soon. We have talked about this before, I think 2018 or 2019, about you and Julio coming here. And we hope everything passes fast and we are safe, and we can have you here at MMA Colombia so you can meet our fighters, see how things work here in Colombia, the talent we have, and why not like having one of our fighters in your team and fighting there.
Yeah, no, it's been my pleasure, and I love what you guys are doing. I've been following your organization and your site for a while, and I think it's great. And I talked about regional promotion, but really what you're doing as well is so important in supporting the MMA community in Colombia and knowing that there's sort of a team and a support system there. So I think what you're doing is great, and I remain available as a resource to you and your team and your members. So you should know you can always reach out to me, and they can always feel to reach out to me with questions or advice or whatever.
Oh, thank you very much.
You're welcome.